Can we start caring again? I don't know at exactly which point we as a society just determined that regardless of what a corporation does behind the scenes is irrelevant, and seemingly since all of them are doing it, everything just becomes okay. But it seems to me that the longer all of this goes on, the less creative everything becomes. And one of the greatest ways that we've been fooled throughout all of this is that we've actually turned against one another when it comes to our rights towards these products that we are purchasing, or these services that we are using, or these mediums that we are watching or playing. For those of you that don't know me, this discussion comes off of the back of my soft reawakening resulting from many of the anti-consumer practices that Nintendo plans to force upon their user base with their upcoming launch of the Nintendo Switch 2. Now, I got plenty of videos discussing the Nintendo stuff. You can check out my Nintendine Talks playlist if you're interested in hearing more about that. But I find myself here today less concerned about what a corporation is doing and more concerned about our population's regression from being customers to being consumers. This may be something as simple as shopping at a specific corporation, whether that's to save a few bucks or for convenience sake, despite the fact that we're well aware that their product is probably not the best quality you're going to get, and the means of which that product ended up on the shelf that you grabbed it from is more than likely an insult to workers' rights, and in many cases, downright inhumane. But somewhere along the line, we as a society accepted that as the status quo, and just continued to move forward. The same could be said about various rideshare services, delivery services, or really anything that you know that pennies of the dollar are going to the actual person doing the work. This is all fairly common stuff. I myself am guilty of many of these things too. And realistically speaking, individually, none of us stand a chance here. This is something that would have to be taken care of at a collective level, and more realistically, at a policy level, which obviously plays a massive role on why people have stopped caring. Now, to shift the discussion towards the entertainment industry, I think you can find many parallels to the discussion on how people view movies, video games, tech, and TV shows. Do you guys remember creativity? Once upon a time, art was more than just doing the same thing that everybody else was doing. I mean, you'd still see a lot of mimicking, but it wouldn't necessarily be the same thing over and over and over again. Disney's MCU is a good example, as well as their ownership of the Star Wars franchise, spitting out movie after movie after movie, seeing the same themes repeated pretty much every single time, until it got to the point where they assumed that anybody would just watch whatever they wanted to. They shifted their focus to streaming, saw that wasn't working out entirely, although with minor successes here and there, and went back to the big screen. Their endless funds show their ability to experiment, but the experimentation is often in how you're viewing the title and not what you are actually viewing, what they are creating. And that seems to be because despite the fact that people keep complaining about the same genre being used over and over again, they're still eating it right up because that's what's culturally relevant. We've been at a steady decline in quality for roughly 15 to 20 years at this point, and the only times we've ever seen successful efforts put into something that we actually genuinely enjoy is when a large portion of the viewers collectively decide that this is no longer worth their money. Now, obviously, in many cases, this isn't because of a giant discussion that occurs. There's no meeting being had by everybody to close their wallets and just stay away. But a lot of times these conversations shift from people who speak out online, various social forums that are usually made up of some of the most diehard fans, that one by one feel their enthusiasm drift away until they no longer are interested in spending their money. Now, in the case of the movie industry, you're not actually buying anything. At worst, you wasted 2.5 hours of your time and maybe 20 bucks at the theaters. When you consider the tech industry, it's not just about the innovation. There are also many challenges to people's rights that occur. Once upon a time, pretty much every single thing that you purchased used to have a flap on it. And if you were to pull back on the tab at the edge of the flap, it would open it up, and there you would find what's called a battery. Now, in the simplest of terms, a battery powers your device. but a battery is a fraction of the price of your device. So if the laptop or the phone that you owned had any issues with the battery, you could pretty simply replace that battery, and you could often do it on your own. As long as your fingernails were long enough, you could do it without even using any tools. But then they started to get smart. One day, while sitting in the boardroom, somebody decided, what if we got rid of that flap? What if we removed their ability to access the battery? Because then, if there's a battery issue, either A, they have to bring it into our shop, in which we make even more money to repair it for them, and that repair is simply changing the battery, or B, the uninformed owner of the device decides that they've had this device long enough and clearly it doesn't work anymore, and it's now time to either replace it or to upgrade. And of course, if you were to try to take the device to a more affordable repair shop, or perhaps even repair it on your own, you would lose the warranty. Now, this was a big discussion for a while, and for many devices across the board, it was just something accepted. Because let's face it, the average consumer doesn't care. They just want the fancy device that everybody else has. And realistically speaking, they're not very tech savvy, they don't really know how to repair things. Well, you know who knows how to repair things? Farmers. So they band together and pushed legislation in order to give themselves the right to repair, because the John Deere tractor had attempted to argue that they did not have the right to repair the tractors that they had purchased. Now, this might not be relevant to many of you because you might have never seen a tractor in your life. Or maybe it's just something you drive by when you're going on a long road trip. But I am sure many of you have a phone, many of you have a laptop, many of you own an Apple product, and you may have noticed that in recent years, Apple was backing the National Right to Repair bill, even offering people parts, offering them manuals, and offering them tools, making it just that little bit less likely to have to replace that $1,000 to $2,000 device 3 years and 1 month after you purchased it because the warranty ended at exactly 3 years. These benefits don't just magically happen. They often occur because of a backlash, because of some form of a protest, but most importantly, either because of terrible PR or a lawsuit. Yeah, if you're gonna affect them financially in any way, shape, and form, they get in line. Now, the issue is with many of these products, it has to get to a PR backlash or a lawsuit because the consumer doesn't care. This doesn't affect them. It might have affected their uncle's friend, for example, but it would never be relevant to their life. So who cares if you have to buy yourself another phone or computer or gaming console? You spend so much money on dumb things anyway, you might as well spend on this too. Now, that is an example of a nice version of the response. Normally what happens is this weird sense of tribalism, this devotion towards a corporation, this feeling that since they bought something from them, it's become part of their identity. And since it's part of their identity, they find that any criticism or backlash towards this corporation is a criticism towards themselves, because the average person thinks they are a lot smarter than they really are. And if they are that smart, they wouldn't buy something dumb, and especially something so expensive. And since this has become the standard mentality of consumers, well, that's why it's always got to get to a lawsuit, because voting with wallets seems to no longer be an actual valid form of protest anymore. Now, over time, technology has evolved, right? Phones, computers, gaming, it's all pretty much become standardized. The types of games that we play have pretty much become standardized. What we expect from our phones has become standardized. Innovation has slowly been pulled away from something that branches from creativity and has for the most part shifted towards the technological advancement. Better quality, higher refresh rates, more captivating visuals, basically doing the exact same thing we did last time, but now it looks a little better. And for a plethora of reasons, people are seemingly okay with that. And that's largely because they want something new, they crave something new, they feel like what they have is old and outdated. But the problem is what they are buying is just not filling that need. It's the same thing they had last time. So if they replace their phone, now they'll feel like they might need to replace their laptop. If they replace their laptop, maybe they gotta replace their gaming console. maybe they need a new TV. Whatever the case is, the average consumer finds themselves in this weird cycle of just frequently buying the exact same thing over and over again. And they're completely okay with it because that's just the way that things are now. And the more that this cycle continues, the more that it will stay the same. It's very mundane, but it is our reality. Now, you could argue this is entirely subjective. Maybe people do just genuinely want the exact same thing. Maybe all they really are looking for is that higher refresh rate. And while I can totally accept that as a valid argument, I do think the larger issue lies in our willingness to be numb towards the anti-consumer practices that I gave a few examples of earlier. I previously mentioned Nintendo, and I imagine many of you who are viewing this have probably listened to a lot of my stuff over the past month. So obviously this is going to be very repetitive. But for those of you that may have clicked on this video because it was related to the entertainment or the tech industry, considering the sales that were made for the Nintendo Switch, I'm sure you or somebody you know realistically owned one. And perhaps you may have even heard of the Joy-Con drift. The Nintendo Switch was known to have a faulty joystick. It would easily begin to drift. Within a month of the launch of the Nintendo Switch, forums online began to sprout of people complaining about the Joy-Con drift. Now, naturally, the first line of defense hits immediately. Those people get told that they need to take better care of their hardware because their Joy-Cons didn't drift, so if yours are drifting, you're clearly doing something wrong. Over time, more and more people fell towards this Joy-Con drift. People within warranty, outside of warranty, it just kept affecting a lot of people. Nintendo, in their natural corporate manner, denied anything was ever a problem. Even when it became a worldwide known issue that it was a problem, they still continued to deny it. And they didn't care because they know that the average person that buys themselves a Nintendo Switch, if their Joy-Con stops working or their kid's Joy-Con stops working, they're just gonna go to the store and buy them a new one. So as far as they were concerned, who cares? People are buying it, we're making more money. And there are enough people online that are telling other folks to make sure their kids stop breaking their controllers because that's why they have the drift issue. Well, eventually, the right people got together and formed a lawsuit against Nintendo. The results varied by region. In 2019, the courts in America ruled in favor of the customers. So Nintendo created a repair program allowing you to send in your Joy-Cons to Nintendo so that they can repair it and send it back to you. But in Europe, they weren't as lucky because the courts didn't rule in their favor until 2023. So despite the fact that this was a known issue on these controllers, and despite the fact that large populations around the world were clearly having issues with this, if the courts didn't force them to repair, they didn't repair. The courts had to be the solution here because people were still buying Switches. They were buying them for their kids, for their friends, for their family. And as long as the average person doesn't care, these things still get purchased. Well, now with the pending launch of the Nintendo Switch 2, many people have wondered what is going to be the solution for this Joy-Con drift, because you're releasing the same thing but bigger, right? That's where we are as a technological society. You just release the same thing, but it's just a little bit crispier. Well, Nintendo's response was two things. Basically, they were just like, yeah, trust us, this time they're much more durable. And they expect people to go based off of their word, even though throughout the entire lifetime of the Switch, they never fixed the Joy-Cons at a manufacturing level. But that wasn't their actual response, because this time their response is more or less an update to their terms of service. Every Nintendo Switch 1 and Nintendo Switch 2 user has to agree to these terms in order to use their console. And amongst many other disgusting anti-consumer practices on these terms, including but not limited to the fact that you no longer own the actual games that you buy, or the fact that Nintendo could remotely brick your console if you're doing something on it that they don't like, or the fact that during this same time frame they removed features that were available on the Switch despite clearly lying to people and saying that they weren't going to remove those features. And all of this, once again, was done via a forced update. Along all of these things, in the terms and conditions, Nintendo insists that if you agree to the terms and you buy their Switch, you basically can't sue them. It's an arbitration clause, which sometimes work, sometimes don't, and it really might depend on where you live, with the legalities not only varying internationally, but even within the state level. The idea here is that if you were to take Nintendo to a court, it would be their own forum that determines the ruling. So imagine that you're making an argument against Nintendo in front of a judge and a jury that is hired by Nintendo. There's a major conflict of interest here. Now, they will swear that these parties are going to be neutral, but there's always a conflict of interest. Now, you can opt out of all of this, but that would require you to write a letter to Nintendo within 30 days of agreeing on said terms of service to opt out of it, and include your email and your address and all your information on there. Because naturally, they wouldn't want to make something so easy like pushing a button on your software to opt out. So now, if we found ourselves in a similar situation where the Joy-Cons happen to continue to drift, and realistically speaking, at least 90% of owners aren't going to be mailing in these letters, those people will not be part of the lawsuit against the Joy-Con drift, or really whatever other flaw may occur in this device. But people don't care. These are just the terms of services, the stuff that we always click on. Our phones make us accept everything, our TVs make us accept everything, our computers make us accept whatever they want us to accept in order to use those devices. And it's never an issue until it becomes an issue. But we've all become so numb to all of these anti-consumer practices that we just don't care anymore. Actually, that's not true. We care, but only enough to attack people that are trying to stand up to make a change for these things. People that want corporations to be held accountable for their flaws in the same way that we are held accountable for ours. But it seems like the corporate agendas have won. Because whenever somebody pushes for basic consumer rights, they're considered controversial. They're considered somebody that spews toxicity. They get torn to shreds by hardcore fans of these devices. People that have made allegiances to a corporation. Because how dare you criticize a company that I have spent thousands of dollars on? Don't criticize them. They make me happy. Who cares about the decline in quality? And who cares about the removal of rights? It's apathetic. Actually, it's just pathetic.